Stop right there. Tenants only. You're not walking into the daily grind.
I'm buying coffee. Move. Take your hand off your spray.
Don't tell me how to do my job. You're trespassing. Turn around, now.
Touch me and you'll be explaining it to the state. I'm the regional health director.
Sure. Fake badge, fake title, last...
The words cut through the low hum of the lobby like a whip crack. It was 10:15 in the morning on a Tuesday, the kind of gray, overcast day that makes the warmth of a coffee shop feel like a necessity rather than a luxury. Brody Miller stood with his legs spread wide, arms crossed over his chest, blocking the entrance to The Daily Grind, an upscale espresso bar nestled in the lobby of the Centurion Plaza. The plaza was a gleaming tower of glass and steel in the financial district, the kind of place where the rent for a single office suite cost more than most people earned in a decade. Brody was 32 years old, though he carried himself with the swagger of a man who believed he was destined for a much higher station. He wore the navy blue uniform of Citadel Security, a utility belt weighed down with a flashlight, a radio, a heavy set of keys, and a canister of pepper spray that he itched to use. He had applied to the police academy twice. He had been rejected twice. The psychological evaluation had flagged him for impulse control issues and rigid thinking patterns, polite, bureaucratic speak for a man who enjoyed power a little too much and had very little patience for anyone who didn't look like him. Standing in front of him, looking confused but remarkably calm, was a woman who stood 5'5" against Brody's 6'2" frame. She wore a heavy trench coat against the rain, a simple scarf, and comfortable walking shoes. Her hands were empty save for a small leather handbag. She was black, her hair pulled back in a practical no-nonsense bun. To Brody Miller, whose worldview was shaped by internet echo chambers and a deep-seated resentment of anyone he deemed out of place, she looked like a vagrant, a wanderer, someone who had slipped in off the street to steal warmth and bother the high-paying tenants of Centurion Plaza. "Excuse me," the woman said. Her voice was soft, melodic, but it held an undercurrent of steel that Brody was too dense to pick up on. "I'm just going to the counter to order a coffee. I have a meeting in the building in 20 minutes. "Yeah, I've heard that one before," Brody sneered, taking a step forward, invading her personal space. He enjoyed this part, the intimidation. It made him feel like the thin blue line he so desperately wanted to be part of. "Meeting with who, the janitor look lady? This is a private corporate environment. The coffee shop is for tenants and guests, not for people looking for a handout or a bathroom to wreck. You need to leave. Now." He didn't ask for her name. He didn't ask who she was visiting. He looked at her skin, he looked at her sensible shoes, and he made a decision that would eventually cost his employer millions of dollars. He decided she was trash that needed to be taken out. The woman didn't back down. She didn't raise her voice, and she didn't curse. She simply adjusted her handbag and looked him directly in the eye. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Vance. I am not soliciting. I am a customer and I am a state official. I suggest you step aside." Brody laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "Dr. Wright, and I'm the Surgeon General. Beat it or I'm physically removing you for trespassing." Dr. Evelyn Vance was not accustomed to being spoken to like a delinquent teenager. At 58 years old, she had spent the last 3 decades of her life navigating the treacherous waters of public health administration. She held a Ph.D. in epidemiology from Johns Hopkins and a master's in public administration. She had led the state through 2 flu epidemics, a measles outbreak and the unprecedented chaos of the recent global pandemic. She was currently serving as the regional health director for the entire tri-state area. Her signature was on the operating licenses of every hospital, clinic, restaurant, and crucially, every coffee shop in the city. Evelyn was a woman of immense patience. You didn't survive 30 years in government without learning how to weather storms. She had sat in congressional hearings while politicians screamed at her. She had negotiated with pharmaceutical CEOs who thought they could buy her integrity. She had walked into quarantine zones that grown men were afraid to enter. A rent-a-cop with a complex was not something that frightened her. It exhausted her. She had arrived at Centurion Plaza early for a scheduled compliance audit with the building's property management firm. The meeting wasn't until 10:30 a.m., but Evelyn liked to arrive early. She liked to get a feel for a place before the suits and ties came out to dazzle her with spreadsheets. She wanted to see the lobby, check the hygiene of the public spaces, and yes, get a cup of black coffee and a scone before the grilling began. "Young man," Evelyn said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice she used when addressing a room full of panicked hospital administrators. "You are making a significant error in judgment. I am not asking for your permission to enter. I am telling you that I am purchasing a coffee. Now move." She stepped to the side, attempting to bypass him. Brody moved faster than his bulk suggested. He sidestepped, blocking her path again, his chest bumping against her shoulder. It was a violation. Physical contact. A distinct escalation. "I said no." Brody growled, his hand drifting to the mace canister on his belt. "You deaf? I'm not gonna tell you again. We have standards here. We don't let just anyone wander in off the street. You people always think you can just walk in wherever you want." You people. The phrase hung in the air, heavy and toxic. The lobby was beginning to fill with mid-morning traffic. Lawyers in $1,000 suits, tech consultants in branded hoodies, and administrative assistants running errands. People were stopping, heads were turning. But nobody intervened. They saw a uniformed guard confronting a black woman in a trench coat, and they made the same calculation Brody had. She must have done something wrong. She must not belong here. Evelyn took a slow breath. She felt the old familiar burn of humiliation rising in her chest, the ancient wound that every black person in America carries, the knowledge that no matter how many degrees you earn, no matter how high you rise to some people, you will always be a suspect first and a citizen second. But she pushed it down. Anger wouldn't help her here. Precision would. "I am going to ask to speak to the manager of this establishment," Evelyn said, gesturing toward the coffee shop counter where a young woman with blonde hair was watching the commotion with a look of annoyance. "If you won't let me buy coffee, perhaps she will explain your store's policy to me." "Chloe!" Brody shouted over his shoulder, never taking his eyes off Evelyn. "Hey, Chloe, we got a vagrant refusing to clear the area. Says she wants to talk to you." Chloe Baxter, the 28-year-old manager of the Daily Grind, sighed audibly. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked around the counter. Chloe was the kind of manager who prided herself on the vibe of her shop. She curated the playlist, she chose the artwork, and she was fiercely protective of the exclusive atmosphere that allowed her to charge $7 for a latte. She wanted her customers to feel safe, comfortable, and elite. She looked at Evelyn. She didn't see the silk blouse under the trench coat. She didn't see the intelligent eyes. She saw a disruption. She saw a black woman standing where she didn't think a black woman should be standing unless she was emptying the trash cans. "What's the problem here?" Chloe asked, crossing her arms. She stood next to Brody, presenting a united front of exclusion. "I'm trying to order a coffee," Evelyn said, her tone level. "This guard physically blocked me and used a racial slur. I would like to order my drink, and I would like his name." Chloe looked at Brody, then back at Evelyn. She let out a short, derisive laugh. "Brody is doing his job. We have a right to refuse service to anyone, and honestly, you're disturbing our customers. Look at them." She gestured vaguely at the cafe where people were indeed staring, not because Evelyn was loud, but because Brody was shouting. "You're making people uncomfortable. This isn't a public park. You can't just hang out here." "I am not hanging out," Evelyn said, her patience fraying by the thread. "I am a customer. I have money. I have business in this building. Are you refusing to serve me because of my race? Because I need you to be very clear about that right now." "Oh my God, don't pull the race card," Chloe groaned, rolling her eyes. "It's so exhausted. I'm refusing you because you're loud, you're aggressive, and you're trespassing. We don't have public restrooms and we don't have free handouts. There's a convenience store 3 blocks down. Go there. They're more your speed." The insult was precise and calculated. More your speed. It was a way of saying low class without using the words. Evelyn stared at the young woman. She thought about the health inspection file currently sitting on the secure server in her office, the one that gave her the power to suspend operations for any establishment that failed to meet state standards regarding hygiene, safety, and equitable access. "I'm going to give you one chance to correct this," Evelyn said. "I'm going to show you my identification. It will explain who I am and why I am here. If you look at it and you still refuse me service, I will leave. But I warn you the consequences will be severe." "We don't need to see your fake ID," Brody interrupted, stepping closer, his hand now gripping the pepper spray canister. "We know who you are. You're leaving. Now." "Show him the badge if it makes you feel better," Chloe said dismissively, turning back to the counter. "But then you leave. I'm calling the police if you're not gone in 2 minutes." Evelyn reached into her bag. She moved slowly, telegraphing her actions so that the jumpy, aggressive guard wouldn't have an excuse to assault her. She withdrew a leather wallet, the kind used by law enforcement and high-ranking government officials. It bore the gold-embossed seal of the State Department of Health. She flipped it open. Inside was a gold badge and a laminated identification card with her photo, her title, Regional Director of Public Health, and a holographic state seal that was impossible to forge without millions of dollars in equipment. "Here," Evelyn said, holding it up for Brody to see. "Read it, carefully." Brody barely glanced at it. He had already decided what the truth was, and his brain was not interested in contradictory evidence. In his mind, black women didn't carry gold badges. Therefore, the badge was fake. It was a toy, a prop. "Where'd you get that?" Brody scoffed, swatting at the air near her hand. "Party City. You think I'm stupid? That's not a real badge. You're impersonating an officer now. That's a felony, lady." "It is not a police badge," Evelyn said, her voice tightening. "It is a state government credential. Read the text." "I don't need to read your garbage," Brody yelled. He was performing now, performing for Chloe, performing for the audience in the lobby. "You're a fraud. You're a trespasser. And now you're trying to scam me. That's it." He reached out and grabbed Evelyn's arm. His grip was hard bruising. Evelyn gasped, dropping the wallet. It hit the marble floor with a heavy thud. "Get your hands off me!" Evelyn shouted, the command echoing off the high ceilings. "You're under arrest for trespassing and assault," Brody yelled, twisting her arm behind her back. He wasn't a police officer. He had no legal authority to arrest anyone unless a felony was committed in his presence. But Brody didn't care about the law. He cared about dominance. "Get on the ground now." Around the lobby, the atmosphere shifted. The bystanders who had been passively watching suddenly woke up. Phones came out. The recording lights blinked on. A young man in a suit stood up from his table. "Hey man, take it easy. She's not fighting you." "Back off!" Brody screamed at the bystander, his face red, a vein bulging in his neck. He shoved Evelyn forward, forcing her chest against the cold granite of the security desk. "I said back off. I've got a hostile subject here. Chloe, call 911. Tell them we have a violent trespasser resisting detention." Evelyn's cheek was pressed against the stone. Pain shot through her shoulder. She was 58. Her joints weren't what they used to be. She could feel the humiliating pressure of his body weight pinning her. But even in that position, with the taste of dust in her mouth, her mind was working. She was memorizing everything. The pressure of his hand, the smell of stale coffee on his breath, the exact time on the clock on the wall, 10:22 a.m. "You have made a mistake that you cannot survive," Evelyn whispered. Brody leaned down, his lips close to her ear. "Shut up. You're done. You're going to jail, and then you're going back to whatever hole you crawled out of." Chloe was on the phone behind the counter, her voice pitched high and frantic, playing the victim perfectly. "Yes, please hurry. She's crazy. She has a fake weapon or badge or something, and she attacked our guard. We're all terrified. Please send help." The audacity of the lie was almost impressive. Evelyn closed her eyes. She stopped struggling. There was no point in fighting physically. The trap was set. Now she just had to wait for the real authorities to arrive. She knew the police. She worked with them daily on mental health crisis teams and addiction outreach programs. She knew the captain of the precinct. Brody held her there for 8 minutes. 8 agonizing minutes where he paraded his captive to the lobby. "See this," he told a courier who walked in. "This is what happens when you don't respect the rules. We keep this place clean." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The blue and red lights flashed against the rain-slicked windows of the plaza. 2 uniformed officers burst through the revolving doors, hands on their holsters scanning for the violent threat. The first officer was a rookie, young and wide-eyed, but the second was Sergeant Miller, no relation to Brody, a 20-year veteran with a graying mustache and eyes that had seen everything. "Police, let her go!" Sergeant Miller commanded, his voice booming. Brody didn't let go immediately. He smiled. The cavalry had arrived to back him up. "I got her secured, officer. She tried to force her way in, showed a fake badge, and then initiated physical contact. I had to subdue her." Sergeant Miller walked over his eyes, moving from the guard to the woman pinned against the desk. He saw the expensive coat. He saw the quality of the shoes. He saw the lack of struggle. "I said let her go," Miller repeated, softer this time, but with more danger in his tone. "Step back, now." Brody released her, stepping back with a smug expression. "Watch her, she's slippery. Claims she's a doctor." Evelyn stood up slowly. She brushed the dust off her coat. She rotated her shoulder, wincing at the pop. She didn't look at Brody. She looked directly at Sergeant Miller. "Officer," Evelyn said, her voice regaining its composure, "my credentials are on the floor. I would like you to pick them up and verify them immediately." Brody snorted. "Don't waste your time, Sarge. It's a printout." Sergeant Miller looked at the woman. There was something familiar about her. The cadence of her speech. The authority. He bent down and picked up the leather wallet. He flipped it open. The sergeant froze. He knew that badge. He knew that seal. Every police officer in the state knew that seal because during the pandemic, the orders bearing that seal were the law of the land. He looked at the photo, then at the woman standing before him. Sergeant Miller's face went pale. He snapped his head toward Brody. "You idiot," Miller muttered. "What?" Brody blinked, his smile faltering. Miller turned the badge so Brody could see it. "Do you know what this is? This is the regional health director. This is a high-level state official. You just assaulted the woman who runs the entire public health department." The silence that fell over the lobby was absolute. The espresso machine hissed a lonely sound in the cavernous quiet. Brody stared at the badge. "No, she's lying. She's black. She can't be." He stopped himself, but it was too late. The words were out. Evelyn stepped forward. She looked 10 feet tall. "I am Dr. Evelyn Vance, and I am currently conducting an official inspection of these premises. Officer, I want this man arrested for assault, false imprisonment, and interference with a government official, and I want that manager detained for filing a false police report." Brody took a step back, his hands shaking. I was just following protocol. She didn't look like..." "Like what?" Evelyn asked, stepping into his space. "Like I belonged. Like I had power. You looked at my skin and you decided I was nothing. And now you are going to learn exactly how much something I am." Chloe behind the counter had gone deathly white. She dropped the phone. "Officer," Evelyn said, turning to the sergeant. "Secure the scene. Nobody leaves. I need to make a call to the governor's office to explain why his appointee was handcuffed for trying to buy a latte." Sergeant Miller nodded, pulling his own handcuffs from his belt, but this time he walked toward Brody. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "But I'm security." Brody stammered, his voice cracking. We're on the same side. We are not on the same side, Miller said, snapping the cuffs on tight. You're a liability, and you're under arrest. As Brody was led away shouting about his rights, Evelyn didn't watch him go. She turned her attention to the counter, to Chloe. The property management team arrived 6 minutes later. 3 men in expensive gray suits sprinting across the marble floor, looking as if they were about to have heart attacks. They had received a call from the governor's chief of staff. Dr. Vance! The lead manager gasped out of breath. We are devastated. This is a misunderstanding. Please come to the conference room. Let us get you some water, some ice for your shoulder. Evelyn held up a hand. I don't want water, and I don't want a conference room. She reached into her bag and pulled out a tablet. She tapped the screen, bringing up a digital inspection form. I am here for a compliance check, Evelyn said. And since I am already here and since I have been denied service, I think I will start my inspection right now with the coffee shop. She walked toward the counter. Chloe was standing there, tears streaming down her face, trembling. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Please, I have a kid. You didn't know I was a director, Evelyn said, her voice cold. But you knew I was a human being. And that wasn't enough for you. Evelyn walked past the counter, pushing through the swinging door into the employee area. Lights up, everything open. I want to see the milk fridges. I want to see the expiration dates. I want to see the rat traps. So, for the next 45 minutes, Dr. Evelyn Vance dismantled the daily grind. It was a white glove inspection of the most brutal kind. And because Chloe had been so focused on maintaining the vibe and profiling customers, she had neglected the actual work. Evelyn found mold in the ice machine. She found milk that was 3 degrees too warm. She found a cockroach trap that hadn't been changed in 6 months under the sink. She documented every single violation with photos, uploading them directly to the state database. When she emerged, the lobby was full of spectators. She walked up to the property manager and the weeping Chloe. This establishment is hereby closed effective immediately due to critical health code violations, Evelyn announced. She slapped a bright orange sticker onto the glass of the pastry case. Revocation of license. You have 30 days to remediate pending a hearing. She turned to the property manager. And as for your security firm, if that company is still contracted by this building by the time I get back to my office, I will deem this entire plaza unsafe for public occupancy and shut the whole tower down. Do I make myself clear? Crystal clear, doctor, the manager said, sweating. He's gone. They're gone. It's done. The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. It was not a quiet affair. It was a scorched earth legal campaign. Evelyn sued the security firm Citadel Security for civil rights violations, assault, and negligent hiring. She sued the Daily Grind corporate parent for discrimination. The security footage of Brody body slamming the regional health director went viral. It was played on CNN, Fox, and MSNBC. It became the defining image of the year, a black woman in professional attire being mauled by a rent-a-cop while a blonde manager cheered him on. The settlement came 10 months later. Citadel Security settled for $3.5 million. The Daily Grind paid $2.8 million. Brody Miller was permanently decertified from holding any security license in the country. He was currently serving 6 months in county jail for assault and filing a false report. Chloe Baxter was fired and blacklisted from the hospitality industry. She was last heard of working in a call center in another state. But the money didn't matter to Evelyn. She donated every cent of the $6.3 million to a scholarship fund for minority students entering public health and law. Dr. Evelyn Vance stood in her office looking out over the city. Her shoulder still ached when it rained. The physical pain was a reminder, a scar. She thought about how easily it could have gone the other way. If she hadn't been the director, if she had been a teacher or a nurse or just a grandmother getting coffee, she would have been arrested. She would have been charged. She would have been just another statistic in a system designed to crush her. The badge had saved her, but it shouldn't have been necessary. Her humanity should have been enough. That is the tragedy of it. We love the stories where the racist gets what they deserve, where the Karen gets fired, where the hero reveals their power. But we forget that for every Evelyn Vance, there are 1,000 women who are dragged out, handcuffed, and humiliated, and no one ever knows their names. Justice for one is not justice for all. It is just a start. Do you think businesses should face mandatory shutdowns for proven racial profiling incidents? Drop your answer below. And if you believe these stories help shine a light on the truth, please hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter.
Sir, 5 seconds. Grab your things and walk out or you're leaving in cuffs.
Officer, I'm a paying customer sitting in my own business. You are out of line.
Hands away from the bag. Last warning.
You're recording this, right?
Then understand, this arrest will end your career.
Sir, you have exactly 5 seconds to grab your things and walk out that door, or you're going to be leaving in cuffs. I am not going to ask you a third time. The voice cut through the warm, yeasty air of the bakery like a jagged knife. It was aggressive, trembling slightly with an adrenaline that was entirely uncalled for on a sunny Tuesday morning. Marcus Thorne didn't look up immediately. He carefully tapped the save icon on his tablet, closed the leather cover, and then slowly raised his eyes to meet the gaze of the young man standing over his table. "Officer." Marcus set his voice a deep, calm baritone that had commanded boardrooms for 30 years. "I'm drinking a coffee and reviewing my quarterly expenses. I haven't raised my voice, I haven't bothered anyone, and I am certainly not leaving." "You're loitering," the officer snapped. His name tag read Bennett. He couldn't have been more than 24 years old. His uniform pressed so sharply it looked like it could cut skin, his hand resting ominously near his holster. "And the manager wants the tables clear for paying customers. Now get up." "I am a paying customer," Marcus replied, gesturing to the ceramic mug and the half-eaten scone on the plate. "And I believe the manager is currently in the back office handling the vendor delivery I scheduled for today." "Don't get smart with me, pal. I saw you through the window. You've been sitting here for 45 minutes just watching the register. We've had reports of vagrants harassing staff in this district. You fit the description." Marcus paused. He looked down at his Italian loafers, then at his tailored charcoal suit trousers, and finally at the silk tie he had knotted perfectly that morning. "Vagrant," Marcus repeated, tasting the word. "Officer Bennett, you are making a profound error in judgment right now. I'm going to ask you to take a breath step back and allow me to show you the identification inside my briefcase." "Hand away from the bag," Bennett barked, his hand dropping to unsnap the retention strap of his service weapon. The few other customers in the shop, a young couple in the corner, and an elderly man reading a newspaper, froze. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. "You reach for that bag and things are going to get bad for you real quick." "I am trying to help you avoid a lawsuit, officer," Marcus said, keeping his hands flat on the table, palms open. "But you seem determined to ruin your own career before lunch. I am not a threat. I am not a vagrant, and I am not going anywhere until I finish my work. But understand that the security cameras in the corners of the ceiling were capturing every frame of this interaction, every pixel of Officer Kyle Bennett's aggression, and every second of Marcus Thorne's composure. And Officer Bennett had absolutely no idea that the man he was threatening to drag out of the Savory Grains bakery was not just a customer. He was the owner. In fact, he owned the entire regional franchise for the tri-state area. Before we see just how badly this rookie officer destroys his future, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Your city, your state, your country. And if you believe that business owners shouldn't be harassed in their own establishments, hit that subscribe button. This story is about to expose a level of incompetence that is hard to believe, but sadly all too real. Marcus Thorne was not a man who sought out conflict, At 55 years old, he had spent the better part of 3 decades navigating the high-stakes world of aerospace engineering. He had retired with a golden parachute and a desire to build something tangible in the community where he grew up. He didn't buy the bakery franchise because he needed the money. He bought it because he wanted to create jobs. He wanted a place where the coffee was good, the staff was paid a living wage, and the neighborhood had a gathering spot that felt safe. He had arrived at the flagship location of Savory Grains at 6:30 a.m. as he did every Tuesday. It was his routine. He liked to sit at the back table near the window, the one that caught the morning sun, and review the numbers before the morning rush truly peaked. He checked inventory, approved payroll, and occasionally tasted the new pastry recipes. To the casual observer, he was just a black man in a suit sitting with a tablet. To anyone who actually knew the neighborhood, he was Mr. Thorne, the man who sponsored the local Little League team and paid for the new roof on the community center. Officer Kyle Bennett, however, did not know the neighborhood. He had been on the force for exactly 6 months. He was a transfer from a rural county 2 hours north, and he had brought with him a specific philosophy of policing that viewed every interaction as a battle for dominance. Bennett was patrolling the commercial district looking for stats. His training officer had told him to be proactive to clear out the riffraff before they drove away the tax-paying citizens. When Bennett drove his patrol car slowly past the bakery, he didn't see a business owner working. He saw a black man sitting alone in a shop that served $5 lattes, looking at the staff and the register. In Bennett's mind, fueled by implicit bias and a lack of experience, this didn't compute as ownership. It computed as casing the joint. He assumed Marcus was waiting for the right moment to rob the place, or was a well-dressed con artist loitering until he could pull a scam. Bennett parked his cruiser in the red zone, blocking the handicap ramp, a violation in itself, and adjusted his belt. He watched Marcus through the glass for a full minute. He saw Marcus look up at the counter, then type on his tablet. To Bennett, this looked like surveillance. He decided he was going to clean up the street. He walked in with his chest puffed out, ready for a fight, completely ignoring the fact that Marcus's suit jacket draped over the chair next to him was worth more than Bennett's entire monthly paycheck. "You need to understand the mindset here," Marcus would later tell his attorney. "He didn't see me. He saw a caricature he had built in his head, and once he decided I was that caricature, nothing I said was going to change his mind. He had already written the ticket in his head before he even opened the door." Inside the bakery, the smell of cinnamon and roasted coffee beans was usually comforting, but now it was tainted by the sharp metallic scent of confrontation. Marcus remained seated, his posture perfect. He had learned a long time ago that when dealing with authority figures who were looking for an excuse, any sudden movement, any display of anger could be fatal. He had to be smarter, he had to be cooler, and he had to be ready to let the officer dig his own grave. "I'm going to count to 3. Bennett said, his voice rising in volume. "If you are not standing up and moving towards that exit, you are going to be placed under arrest for criminal trespass and failure to obey a lawful order." "On whose authority am I trespassing?" Marcus asked, his voice steady, though his heart was beginning to hammer against his ribs. He knew the law. He knew that for a trespassing charge to stick, the owner or an authorized agent of the property had to request the person's removal. "Has the manager asked me to leave? Has the owner asked me to leave?" "I am the authority," Bennett spat back, "and I'm telling you that you're disrupting business." At that moment, the door to the back office swung open. Sarah, the store manager, stepped out holding a clipboard. She was a woman in her 40s who had worked for Marcus for 2 years. She froze when she saw the uniformed officer towering over her boss. Her eyes went wide, shifting from the officer's aggressive stance to Marcus's calm demeanor. "Officer," Sarah called out, stepping around the counter. "Is there a problem here?" Bennett spun around, holding up a hand to stop her approach. "Stay back, ma'am. I'm handling a disturbance. I need you to stay behind the counter for your own safety." "Disturbance?" Sarah looked confused. "That's Mr. Thorne. He's not disturbing anyone. He's..." I said stay back, Bennett yelled, his voice cracking slightly. Do not interfere with a police investigation or I will cite you for obstruction. Is that clear? Officer, please, Marcus said, his tone sharpening. That is my employee. You will not speak to her that way. Sarah, do not engage with him. Go back to the office and call my attorney. His number is on the emergency contact list. He's not calling anyone, Bennett snapped. He turned back to Marcus, his face flushing red. The fact that this vagrant was giving orders to the staff and talking about attorneys was infuriating him. It didn't fit the script. It challenged his control. Stand up. Now, turn around. I am trying to tell you, Marcus said, speaking slowly and clearly for the benefit of the witnesses and the recording devices he knew were rolling. My identification, my business license, and the deed to this property are in my briefcase. If you simply let me open it, you will see that I am the owner of this franchise. You are attempting to kick a man out of his own business. I don't care what you say you have, Bennett said, reaching for his handcuffs. You had your chance to leave. Now you're going to jail. You can show your papers to the judge. Bennett didn't want truth. He wanted compliance. He had made a command in front of an audience, and in his immature view of policing, backing down now would make him look weak. He was operating on pure ego, driven by the terrifying belief that his badge gave him the right to create his own reality. He grabbed Marcus's left arm and yanked him upward. Marcus didn't fight. He didn't pull away. He stood up with the grace of a man who knew exactly who he was, allowing the officer to twist his arm behind his back. The physical contact was jarring, an indignity Marcus hadn't suffered since he was a teenager in the 1970s, but he maintained his composure. You are making a mistake that will cost this city dearly, Marcus said quietly. Yeah. Tell it to the booking sergeant, Bennett grunted, snapping the first cuff onto Marcus's wrist. The sound of the ratcheting handcuffs was loud in the quiet shop. Click, click, click. It was a sound that signified the total stripping of a citizen's liberty. Bennett roughly pulled Marcus's other arm back, securing the second cuff. The metal bit into Marcus's wrists, tight and cold. You're hurting him, Sarah yelled from behind the counter, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. She held her phone up, recording the scene, her hand shaking. That is the owner. You are arresting the owner. Ma'am, one more word and you're joining him. Bennett threatened over his shoulder, sweating now. He felt the eyes of the room on him. The young couple in the corner had their phones out too. The elderly man had put down his paper and was writing something in a notebook. I am compliant, officer, Marcus stated, his voice projecting. I am offering no resistance. I have informed you of my identity and my status as the property owner. You are arresting me without probable cause. You're under arrest for trespassing, disorderly conduct, and resisting an officer, Bennett reciting the catch-all charges bad cops used when they had no actual crime to report. He pushed Marcus toward the door. Let's go. Marcus walked with his head high. He didn't look at the floor. He looked directly at Sarah. Call David, he said, referring to his lawyer. Then call Councilman Reynolds. Tell him what happened. Bennett paused for a split second at the mention of the city councilman, but he was too far gone to stop. He shoved Marcus through the glass door and out onto the sidewalk. The bright morning sun hit them, a stark contrast to the dark turn the day had taken. Passers-by stopped and stared. To them, it looked like a criminal was being apprehended, a black man in handcuffs being led away by the police. It was an image that reinforced every negative stereotype, every bias, every fear. But Marcus knew that the visual narrative would change. He knew that the video Sarah was taking and the videos from the customers would tell a different story. Watch your head, Bennett said, unnecessarily rough as he pushed Marcus into the back of the patrol vehicle. The hard plastic seat was uncomfortable, designed to be dehumanizing. The car smelled of stale sweat and industrial cleaner, as Bennett slammed the door, shutting Marcus inside the cage. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment. He felt a deep burning anger, not just for himself, but for every person who had sat in this seat who didn't own a franchise. For every person who didn't have a high-powered attorney on speed dial. For every young man who would have panicked, pulled away, and ended up beaten or worse. He opened his eyes and looked through the wire mesh as Bennett got into the driver's seat. The rookie looked pumped up, breathing hard, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked like he had just won a prize. He had no idea he had just signed his own termination letter. The drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. Bennett didn't speak, and neither did Marcus. The silence in the car was thick, filled with the static of the police radio and the humming of the tires on the asphalt. Bennett was likely running through his report in his head, figuring out how to articulate the threat Marcus had posed. He would use words like furtive movements, belligerent stance, and refusal to identify. He was crafting a fiction to cover his incompetence. Marcus, on the other hand, was memorizing details, the time of day, the speed of the vehicle, the fact that Bennett was texting on his personal cell phone while driving the squad car. He was building his case file mentally, organizing the facts with the precision of the engineer he used to be. When they pulled into the sally port of the 12th precinct, the heavy metal doors rolled down behind them, sealing them in the concrete intake area. Bennett hauled Marcus out of the car. "Let's go. Booking is this way," Bennett said, gripping Marcus's arm again. They walked through the double doors into the processing area. It was a busy morning. Phones were ringing and other officers were typing reports. At the main desk sat Desk Sergeant Thomas Miller. Miller was a fixture of the department, a man with 25 years of service, gray hair, and a no-nonsense attitude. He knew the community. He knew the players. Bennett marched Marcus up to the high desk. "Possession of a attitude trespassing and resisting," Bennett announced proudly, placing Marcus's wallet and keys on the counter. "Found him loitering in that bakery on 4th. Wouldn't leave when told." Sergeant Miller looked up from his computer screen. He looked at Officer Bennett. Then he looked at the man in handcuffs. Miller's eyes narrowed. He squinted as if trying to process an image that didn't make sense. Then his face went pale. He stood up slowly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Officer Bennett." Miller said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yeah, Sarge," Bennett asked, oblivious. "Why is Mr. Thorne in handcuffs?" Bennett blinked. "Mr. who? This guy refused to ID. Said he owned the place or something. Just another guy talking trash." Miller walked around the desk. He didn't look at Bennett. He looked at Marcus. "Mr. Thorne, I am. I don't even know what to say. Are you injured?" "The cuffs are a bit tight, Sergeant Miller," Marcus said calmly. "And I believe your officer here has made a significant error regarding the definition of trespassing." Miller turned to Bennett. The look on the sergeant's face was not one of anger. It was one of pity and disbelief. "Bennett, do you know who this is? This is Marcus Thorne. He is the chairman of the Police Athletic League. He donates the turkeys for the precinct food drive every Thanksgiving. And yes, you moron, he owns the Savory Grains franchise. All 12 locations." The blood drained from Kyle Bennett's face so fast it looked like he might faint. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him for the first time, and saw the quality of the suit, the dignity in the posture, the cold intelligence in the eyes. He didn't show me ID," Bennett stammered. "I offered to show you my business license," Marcus corrected him. "You threatened to shoot me if I reached for my bag." The squad room had gone silent. Other officers had stopped what they were doing and were watching. Sergeant Miller pulled a key from his belt. "Uncuff him, now." "But once the cuffs are on, I have to process." Bennett started falling back on procedure to save himself. "I said take them off," Miller roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Bennett's hand shook as he unlocked the handcuffs. Marcus rubbed his wrists where red, angry marks had formed. He adjusted his cuffs and straightened his jacket. "Mr. Thorne, please come with me to the captain's office," Miller said, trying to salvage the situation. "We can sort this out. I'm sure Officer Bennett here simply—" "I'm not going to the captain's office to chat, Sergeant," Marcus interrupted. "And we aren't going to sort this out off the record." At that moment, Lieutenant Henderson, the watch commander, burst into the room. He had clearly just gotten a phone call. He looked frantic. "Mr. Thorne, I just got a call from Councilman Reynolds. I am so sorry. There has been a terrible misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Lieutenant," Marcus said, his voice ice cold. "It was a false arrest. It was profiling. And it was a violation of my 4th and 14th Amendment rights. Look, we can drop all charges immediately," the lieutenant said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "We'll expunge the record of the arrest. You can walk out of here right now and we will deal with Officer Bennett internally. We can make this go away." This was the pivot point, the moment where the system tries to protect itself. They wanted Marcus to accept the apology, take the unarrest, and leave so they could sweep it under the rug. "No," Marcus said. The room went deadly silent again. "Excuse me?" the lieutenant asked. "I said no. You aren't going to drop the charges and pretend this didn't happen. I want you to finish the booking process." "Mr. Thorne, you don't want an arrest record," Miller said. "I want the paper trail," Marcus replied. "I want Officer Bennett to sign his name to the statement of probable cause. I want him to write down under penalty of perjury exactly what crime he believes I committed. I want a booking number, because without that official record, this is just a misunderstanding. With that record, it is evidence in a federal lawsuit." Bennett looked like he wanted to vomit. He realized now that he hadn't just caught a big fish. He had caught a shark, and he was currently bleeding in the water. "Process me," Marcus commanded. "Take my fingerprints. Take my mugshot. Do it by the book, because I am certainly going to do everything by the book when I sue this department and this city." They had no choice. For the next hour, the officers of the 12th Precinct had to humiliate themselves by booking one of their biggest supporters. They fingerprinted him. They took his photo. And every step of the way, Marcus Thorne watched them with the eyes of a man who was already writing the closing arguments for his trial. Marcus was released on his own recognizance 2 hours later. He walked out of the precinct to find a small army of reporters waiting. Sarah had not only called the lawyer, she had sent the video to the local news station. By that evening, the story was national. The cell phone footage from inside the bakery was playing on loop on cable news. It showed the stark contrast, a calm, well-dressed black man trying to eat his breakfast and a young, aggressive officer escalating a non-situation into a crisis. The headline was devastating: "Bakery owner arrested for trespassing in his own store." The following morning, Marcus stood at a podium outside the federal courthouse, flanked by his attorney and several civil rights leaders. He looked rested, focused, and dangerous. "Yesterday I was arrested because an officer of the law could not conceive of a world where a man looking like me could own a business like that," Marcus told the bank of microphones. "He didn't see a citizen. He saw a suspect. And because of his bias, he violated the sanctity of my property and my person." The lawsuit filed that afternoon was a masterclass in civil rights litigation. It didn't just target Bennett. It targeted the training protocols of the entire department. It cited the failure to investigate and unlawful seizure. The Department of Justice took notice. Within a week, federal investigators were reviewing the precinct's stop and frisk data. They found what Marcus suspected they would find. Officer Bennett wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom of a culture that rewarded aggressive stats-based policing over community engagement. The internal affairs investigation into Bennett was swift and brutal. The security camera footage from the bakery, which included audio, proved that Bennett had lied in his initial verbal report to the sergeant. He had claimed Marcus was shouting and belligerent. The video showed Marcus speaking in a normal conversational tone. Bennett had claimed he feared for his safety. The video showed Marcus sitting down with his hands on the table. But the nail in the coffin was the business license. Investigators found that Bennett had indeed been offered proof of ownership and had refused to look at it. This constituted willful ignorance of exculpatory evidence. Officer Kyle Bennett was placed on unpaid administrative leave. His union representative, usually a bulldog in these situations, told him frankly, "You arrested a guy who has dinner with the chief of police. You ignored his ID. You lied to the sergeant. There is nothing I can do for you." 6 weeks later, Officer Bennett was terminated for cause. He lost his pension, his badge, and his career. He was 24 years old, and he would never work in law enforcement again. The last report on him stated he had moved back to his rural hometown working construction, forever known as the cop who arrested the owner of the bakery. The city, desperate to stop the bleeding of bad publicity and facing a trial they knew they would lose, settled with Marcus Thorne for $1.2 million. But Marcus didn't buy a new car. He didn't go on vacation. He took that check, stood in front of the Savory Grains Bakery, and handed it directly to a newly formed non-profit organization, the Thorne Legal Defense Fund. "This money," Marcus said in his final interview on the matter, "is for the people who get stopped but don't own the franchise. It's for the kids who get cuffed for walking home. It's for the people who don't have the resources to make the system listen. I didn't win this because I was innocent. I won because I was powerful. And that is a problem we have to fix." The bakery is still there. It's busier than ever. People come from all over the city to buy coffee and support the business. And in the 12th precinct, there is a new photo on the wall of the briefing room. It's a screenshot from the security video showing Bennett standing over Marcus. Underneath it, someone has taped a simple caption, "Assumption is the mother of all screw-ups. Check the ID." It's a quiet reminder to every rookie who walks through those doors. Marcus still sits at that back table on Tuesday mornings. He drinks his coffee. He checks his spreadsheets. But now, when officers walk by on patrol, they don't look at him with suspicion. They wave. They know who he is. But more importantly, they know that the man in the suit isn't just a suspect. He is a citizen with rights, and violating those rights carries a price they can't afford to pay. This story isn't just about a bad cop or a lawsuit. It's about the fragility of dignity. It took Marcus Thorne 30 years to build his reputation, and it took Officer Bennett less than 30 seconds to try and strip it away. It reminds us that authority without wisdom is just bullying. Marcus Thorne had the strength and the means to fight back, but his story forces us to ask what happens to the ones who don't. Accountability shouldn't depend on your bank account or who you know at City Hall. It should be the standard. What would you have done if you were in Marcus's shoes? Would you have let them unarrest you to avoid the hassle, or would you have demanded they book you to prove a point? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe in justice and accountability, please like this video and share it. It helps us tell more stories that matter.